Hello, and this is going to do another lecture. If you saw my previous video about the Olympics, this time we're going to talk about another controversial topic. It's called the GI Bill. It all started what was considered a bonus army after World War One in the United States. And what the United States did when they refused to give them basic right to U.S. veterans who sacrificed and gave PTSD in World War One, let's kill them. They actually brought tanks and stuff and killed true soldiers. It was the U.S. military versus the U.S. military. Literally, like that's awful, right? It's like, oh man, America could just, man, you guys need a social revolution for real. But regardless, what was the bonus army? Well, that's where all the veteran benefits came from. But how they came from? So this is the answer. While prosperity spread through the upper middle class during the Hycleon days of the 1920s, veterans faced near-epic level of parsimony. Those who served during the war had been promised a bonus for their services. The perennial Secretary of the Treasury, Andrew Mellon, who just happened to also be one of the richest men in the United States, opposed the granting of any bonuses is likely to lead to inflation and persuade President Harding to veto the bill that would have been delivered to promise rewards for the services. Many wealthy people selflessly opposed the bonus for the good of the veterans in order to keep their heroic sacrifice from being tainted by the dodgy aura of filthy lucre. As George Easton put it, a bonus would make mercenaries out of patriotic boys. Perry S. DuPont, who had added his considerable fortune through military contracts during the war, was a bit more abrasive and characteristic the veterans as already the most favored class in the United States, who clearly had no need for a bonus. That servant of the rich and powerful, the Wall Street Journal dismissed veterans seeking government aid as panhandlers. The Republican administration of 1921 to 1933 did their best to make the veterans feel guilty for asking for help. President Calvin Coolidge offered up of his promise in rejecting a bonus bill in 1924. Patriotism, which is bought and paid for, is not patriotism. Congress passed a bill over his veto, though only by establishing that the veterans would have to wait until 1945 to collect their $1,000. With the advent of the Great Depression in 1929, many veterans began calling for at least some part of their promised bonuses to be delivered early, which eventually they did. How? Well, how do I say this? When Congress passed a compromise bill that will allow veterans to borrow money on half of the value of their bonuses at 4.5% interest, President Herbert Hoover vetoed it with the assurance that the local communities offer all the assistance everyone needed. The government seemed to intend to make every veteran regret his services. The Sergeant Arthur W. Waters of Portland, Oregon was one of the many destitute veterans driven over the edge into dire poverty in the first years of the Depression. He and his wife frantically searched for work to support their two children. Pulling newspaper out of trash cans, Waters read of loans to railroads and to large corporations, and unsurprisingly felt that he also deserved some form of assistance. In 1932, he attended a protest meeting in Portland and heard a talk of veterans going to Washington to make their case before Congress. Waters joined many other veterans who spontaneously, again anarchist tactics, began hopping trains and heads east. The employees of many railroads let the veterans alone while the management of other railroads ordered a crackdown and threw, you know, the riders off their trains, only to find the local supporters, including members of the National Guard, who get them rides in the back of trucks and in fleets of beat up cars. When Waters arrived in the capital, he found 1,000 veterans already there, with thousands more pouring into the ensuing weeks. The estimated 25 to 40,000 veterans formed themselves into the Bonus Expeditionary Force, or BEF, with a few thousand black veterans in their midst. The BEF was far more integrated than the AEF had ever been, through the intervention of the capital's chief of police. Wilhelm Glassworth, himself a veteran, ran the Bonus Army was allowed to camp out on the Anacostia Flats in southeastern Washington. When Glassworth could not persuade the Secretary of War to make surplus military equipment available to the veterans, he organized a fundraising effort on their behalf. Class 4 assigned police officers who were veterans to work with the Bonus Army. Relations between the protester and police were so positive that the BEF named Ancostian Camp Marks after police captain S.J. Marks. The Bonus Army marched, held rallies, met with members of the Congress, pictured the Capitol, and watched their hopes evaporate as Congress defeated the latest bonus bill. The political leaders, newspaper, and army intelligence warned that the BEF was the vanguard of revolution, a front for communism or fascism, superseding interchanging democracy. On July 28, the peaceful relation between veterans and the police ended with the eviction of the group of protesters from the old National Guard armory on the corner of the 3rd and Pennsylvania. Police clubbed those who didn't move fast enough, and in a showing scuffle, the police shot and killed 2 veterans. Tear gas shells were fired into the crowd. One killed a baby. At this point, Hubert Hoover turned to General Douglas MacArthur, who sincerely believed that the Bonus Army intended to overthrow the government. Added by Major Dwight D. Eisenhower and the contingent accomplished under Major George S. Patton, MacArthur moved onto the Anacostia encampment on the eve of July 28, and to deploying tear gas. MacArthur ordered his infantry to move with bayonet fixes. Most of the engagement consisted of joyously pushing and setting fire to the veterans' huts and tenants. The veterans were evicted. MacArthur declared victory and announced that only 1/10 of the Bonus Army march were actually veterans. Later, a veteran administration survey found that 94% of the Bonus Army were veterans. 20% suffered from disability. The treatment of the veterans in Washington, D.C. was a public relations disaster for Herbert Hoover, and certainly did his re-election campaign little good. Not that veterans benefited from the change of administration, as Franklin Roosevelt also opposed a bonus pill, vetoing one in 1934 and another in 1936. And by the way, many people, Mussolini had declared Franklin D. Roosevelt the most left-leaning economic president ever as a fascist like him. But in the later years, Congress passed a bill over the president's veto, finally offering some relief to those who had fought to make the world safe for democracy. Writing in 1926, the veteran pilot Eliot White Spring prophetically spoke for those who questioned the ideals that they fought for. War is a horrible thing, a grotesque comedy. It is so useless this war won't prove anything. All we do when we read is to substitute one sort of dictator for another. In the meantime, we have destroyed our best resources. Human life, the most precious thing in the world, have become the cheapest. After we won this war by drawing the Hun in our own blood, in 5 years' time, we sentimental fools at home will be taking up collection for those same Huns that are killing us now that our own fool politicians will be cooking out another war. Many examples of veterans using basically anarchist tactics to achieve their goals, like the Battle of Athens, who overthrew the local government in Athens, Tennessee, and other similar cases when many influential veterans become anarchists, like Howard Zinn, who became famous for publishing the fundamental history book, The People's History of the United States, and his companion book, Voices of the People's History of the United States. So yeah, it shows you like the people, no matter how patriotic you are, the moment you betray them and show the real values of humanity, which is anarchism, if they will see the true potential of what they are capable of.